Thursday night football, and it was shocking. Breaking news. It was a blowout. We all thought it was going to be a blowout. It was a blowout. Lamar is back. The Ravens are back, baby. They win 28-6 in what was, I don't think, the cleanest game for the Ravens, but it just looked like the Ravens were getting on track, and it looked like the Dolphins, frankly, just are a terrible football team.
Not the cleanest game from the Ravens, but it was significantly cleaner than the Miami Dolphins. And that was kind of my biggest takeaway from this game. I stepped away from it saying, yeah, okay. That makes sense with the sheer number of Thursday night games that we've had this season that are weird and wacky and crazy and inexplicable and feels like there's some funky voodoo hovering over Thursday night football. What should have happened last night, what I think we all expected to happen last night, came to fruition. What we felt like we knew these teams were, they showed themselves to be last night. And starting with the Baltimore Ravens, sure, in the first half, it was a little bit slower of a start, but I expected a much more rusty Lamar Jackson than we got last night, just given that he hadn't played football in over a month. And the last time that we saw Lamar Jackson was a really brutal, offensive day filled with a bunch of mistakes and several missed passes from Lamar Jackson against the Kansas City Chiefs just over a month ago. So it was refreshing to me, especially in the second half when we saw an offensive surge, when we saw that pass from Lamar Jackson to Zay Flowers. I was like, yeah, okay, he is back. That this is the Ravens team that we know. This is the Ravens team that we expected. And I don't want to put too much into Lamar and this Ravens team against a truly dreadful Dolphins team. It's great if you can beat up on the bad teams, but let's see you do it against the good teams. But for right now, just after last night, so far, so good. And I think Ravens fans should be really good about the optimism that can come from this next stretch of not very good football teams from on the Ravens schedule.
Well, and this is what happens when you get Lamar back, because there were a couple of times last night where most quarterbacks would be sacked, and Lamar pulled his way out of that sack and managed to extend the play. There were a couple of times last night where he stepped up into the pocket, and that helped some crossing routes come open. You look at his efficiency, 18 of 23 for 78% completion, 204, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. That just speaks to how at times it almost looked like for Lamar it was a practice. Like it didn't look like he was getting pressured or having to make tough decisions. It was just a matter of could he move around long enough to find the open guy, which he did brilliantly. And I think this is why everybody constantly is looking for their Lamar Jackson, because how do you go from being a terrible football team to a division favorite? You get Lamar back. And that's the weirdest part about all of this, is that sometimes you really do have one guy that is essentially a franchise fixer. That's what Lamar has been, and that's what Lamar will continue to be. Now, I don't think that there's enough grass left for Lamar to suddenly become an MVP candidate. And I don't really think that matters, Caroline. I think what matters right now is that rather than Lamar the MVP, he's already done that a couple of times. What matters right now to the conversation we've all had is where can the Ravens season go? And in 10 days, they've gone from, wow, this thing's a disaster. In 10 days, 2 wins. Now all of a sudden it's like, nope, going to be just fine. This is why Vegas has been telling everybody for months that they're still the favorite in the division. Now they're the overwhelming favorite in the division. And don't look now, if the Steelers lose this weekend, the Ravens will be a game back. Hell, even if the Steelers don't lose, 2 games will separate these teams, and they still play each other twice. The Ravens are in the driver's seat for some, not just to win their division. The question is going to be, can Lamar take them deep into the AFC playoffs? And I think we saw last night the answer to that's always going to be yes.
Yes. And to your point, I don't think that Lamar would be in contention for MVP at this point, just given the number of games that he's missed. Anything can happen over the span of the next several weeks. But I don't think that Lamar needs to be top 5 in MVP odds on the sports books for all of us to understand what he means to that football team. I mean, Lamar Jackson is not a 2-time MVP, could have been a 3-time MVP for no reason. Even though he's not going to win the award, I don't think right now today, I still consider Lamar an MVP of the league because of how much of a spark plug he is to his football team. And look, early in the season, the defense was bad, injured or not, and Lamar had a shaky day against the Chiefs. And yes, okay, that happened, and we can't just ignore that. But I think last night, how much more explosive the Ravens looked with Lamar Jackson, how different that team is with Lamar Jackson versus without Lamar Jackson is just proof of how important he is to that team. Now, I still don't trust their defense. It's hard to trust that defense, but I do trust Lamar.
I don't disagree with any of that. I want to look at the other side real quick with Tua.
Yeah.
Because you know me, part of what, as I joke all the time, part of what makes me a terrible friend and at times terrible in relationships is because I'm just so logical. Like there is no spot for me for outside the box with logic, right? So like I admit that. I think Dolphins fans need to hear the real logic on Tua because everybody is asking, what's the future of Tua? What's the future of Tua? The future of Tua is he's going to be the Miami Dolphins quarterback next year. Get used to it right now. When you look at the salary cap, if you take a look at like a spot track, it looks like they have a potential out after the 2026 season. Next year, he costs about $56 million. Yes, it would make a ton of sense to draft another quarterback next year if you have one that you think can go out there and push Tua. But just like I was the one that kept saying, hey, Deshaun Watson's going to be stuck with the Browns, and Browns fans didn't want to hear it. No, there's got to be a way around it. No. Like, you signed the deal. You're in the deal. You're stuck with the deal that you have. Yes, Tua is not good enough. Yes, you would love to unload him. Yes, we can come up with fancy trade proposals, and ESPN.com had an interesting one that's a salary cap dump to get rid of Tua. I see all of these things. But the reality of it is, if you're just talking what's actually going to happen and not what makes for great clicks on the internet, way more likely than anything is Tua's going to be the starting quarterback in the Miami Dolphins next year. Maybe they bring competition into the room. Maybe they draft somebody. But if your answer is get rid of Tua, you can't do that for another year because of the contract you signed. So your only answer right now is take your lumps, deal with it, and you can actually solve the situation after another full season. Nobody wants to hear that because it doesn't sound good, but it's the real answer here to me, Caroline.
But this is so much bigger than a Tua problem, in my opinion. You know, you're not 2-7 because your quarterback is the only problem on this team. This team is dysfunctional. And it is obvious, whether it's things that we hear in headlines or whether it's the way that they look on the football field. They turned the ball over 3 times last night. That's a product of coaching. Their demeanor on the sidelines, the way that it feels like there's a certain level of electricity that is necessary to win games in the National Football League that the Dolphins just do not have. It is a fundamental core issue within the Miami Dolphins organization. I don't think it's just time to move on from Tua, and I don't think it's just a Tua problem. It would be disingenuous of me to say it is only a Tua problem. Although he is not innocent in this, it's a Mike McDaniel problem, and it's a Chris Grier problem. Things have gotten so bad, so dreadful, so obviously dreadful and dysfunctional in Miami that I don't think that they have any option but to completely clear house. Not just move on from Tua and go into cap hell that it would, that it would take you, it would put you in. But you have to move on from Mike McDaniel. You have to move on from general manager Chris Grier. It is too far gone at this point, and it was on full display last night. And I know that I just finished saying that what we saw from the Dolphins last night was what we expected. So maybe I shouldn't be surprised by this, but isn't what we expected 6 points against a truly dreadful Baltimore Ravens defense when you turn the ball over within the 20? Isn't that a shame? And isn't that enough of an indictment on the leadership in that organization? Is that 6 points against a bad defense is what we've come to expect? What we've come to expect from the Miami Dolphins?
Yeah, you're right. Here's my prediction. There'll be a new GM and there'll be a new head coach in Miami next season. And both of those gentlemen will still have Tua on this roster because it takes one more year to get out of him. It doesn't mean Tua is the answer. It just means, I think, unfortunately, because there's no salary cap for GM and coaches, I think you're right. They need a full reset. I just think it's going to have to be done. 2/3 of it will be done this offseason with GM and coach, but then the quarterback situation is going to take another year.